Yeah, well, in the simplest terms, a digital mindset is the ability to think and reason about the social world and about the business world through a lens of technology and data. That maybe sounds a little abstract, so let me get a little bit more concrete. It means being able to see what possibilities exist and what constraints exist, given that technologies are so far, moving into the center of all of our lives, right? They're fueling just about every business. When I started in this career over 20 years ago, I often said that I studied and consulted with technology-based businesses. And I could sort of define what that meant. Today, I can't anymore, right? Because every business is a technology business at its core, and it's becoming increasingly so with the digital revolution. And so, just because we have the right tools at our disposal doesn't necessarily mean we know how to use them, what opportunities exist that we could apply those tools to help us with, or problems that these tools could help solve. Nor do we often understand many of the constraints that these tools bring for us and how we carry out our business. So that's what a digital mindset is. It's the ability to see about the world and see about our businesses right through the lens of technology and data.
So, how much do we need to know about technology to do this?
Yeah, I get this question all the time, and it inspired something that we talk about in the very first chapter of the book called the 30% rule. And we really struggled, do we want to try to define a threshold, right, at which people sort of need to get to in order to develop the right kinds of technical skills to be fluent, roughly fluent or conversational, let's say, in the age of digitization and technological change. But we thought it was a helpful heuristic for people because, so many executives come to me and say, okay, well, do I need to learn how to code, right? If I'm going to, be successful. And the answer is no, right? To have a digital transformation in your company, you likely don't need to learn how to code. But what you do need to be able to do is know enough about coding. We always joke sort of to be dangerous, right? To be able to talk to the people in your organization who are working with your code base to develop your tools so that you understand some of the opportunities and constraints of your technology platform and your technology stack, that you recognize right where there are opportunities for security vulnerabilities, and so that you can make smart decisions about where do we move in terms of product strategy. So the way that we arrived at this 30% was we interviewed, over 1,000 different people in a number of different companies that we think have really done a great job of embracing this sort of digital movement. And we tried to understand from them, well, what are the kinds of skills that you need? And it's so funny, when we talk to leaders who came from the technical side, they would often say, you don't need to know anything about the technical side, right, to be a great leader of one of these businesses. And then we talk to non-technical leaders and they say, oh, you have to learn so much technical stuff. And it was just the opposite of what you would think, right? But I think what happens is that, if you come from the non-technical side, you really do take for granted a lot of the skills that you have and how they've created a lens that allows you to see problems. But when you come from the non-technical backgrounds, you recognize that you've had to work hard to develop a set of skills and a set of frameworks to really understand what the technology in your business is doing so that you can make smart decisions. The analogy that we use that I think is really helpful is from foreign language learning. So there's been a lot of research over the years that suggests, and I'll use just English as an example here because I got hard numbers with English, but if you are a person who's learning English as a foreign language that you want to speak in the workplace, if you can get about 3,000 to 3,500 words of the English language, you will have a level of proficiency that allows you to operate very, very smoothly and conversationally in business English in the workplace. 12,000 words roughly is fluent level, native level speaking. And so once you have about 30% of the words necessary, you operate very effectively. I think that analogy applies really nicely to learning technical skills, that you don't need to be a data scientist and you don't need to be a network security expert. But what you do need to know are what is the vocabulary, What are the core concepts? Why are people making choices over, programming in different uh, domains of languages, in order to be able to have those conversations with all of the key leadership people across your company so that you can start building your strategy and moving your organization in that direction. And that 30% really shifts a lot. What the composition of that 30% shifts based on whether you're a senior executive, whether you have you're running a business unit with P&L, whether you're an individual contributor, because you'll need to know some of more skills and some of fewer skills, right? And you get to that 30% in different ways. And there's not really a one size fits all strategy.
Can you give us an example of a successful collaboration between a non-technical leader and a technical leader, and kind of how that 30%, what that 30% looked like in practice?
Sure. I'll give you a story. And it speaks to the subtitle of the email that you sent me today, which was, what is a digital mindset and why does it matter? And I think this will speak to the and why does it matter piece. So, oh boy, it was probably about a decade ago now. I gave a talk at a large software company. And this particular company built collaboration tools for the enterprise and had an enterprise social networking site that was one of their prime, the products that they had that generated a primary source of revenue for the company. And I was there to give a talk about collaboration and how they could think about, spurring more collaboration on their social networking platform, and what are best practices that they could then use to help their customers to develop stronger knowledge-based communities. It was a really enjoyable talk. And at the end of it, I sat down with the CMO, and the CMO and I were having a chat, and I said, you collect a tremendous amount of metadata about every single interaction that takes place on your platform. Have you thought about how you might be using that metadata to run some kinds of predictive analytics that could help the companies that are your customers make smarter decisions about things like team design or succession planning or how you deal with turnover? And he looked at me and he was like, metadata? What do you mean exactly? And so we had this conversation about what metadata is. And he said, I still don't really get it. So we had several more follow-on conversations afterwards. And what he began to realize was that the technologies that they were building, right, the product, generated a tremendous amount of data that he had never even thought of as a source of competitive advantage. And once we were able to talk through what those data meant, how you could think about them, what they could be potentially used for, he was then able to engage with the SVP of product in a common language to be able to talk about what kind of product development would be really useful for them. And so I ended up working with this company over 2 or so years then to help kind of bridge between the technical side of the organization and the marketing side of the organization to help build and ultimately launch a new product that ran sort of predictive analytics for HR. Ended up being a very successful product. But this is a prime example, right, of how you can think about what does that interface look like between the technical and non-technical parts of your organization, and that you could not see an opportunity that exists right in front of you if you don't have an understanding of what your software is doing, the kinds of data that it's collecting, and then how you might be able to take that data and productize it in a unique way.